Okay, so we are live now. All right, so hey guys, this is part of the overall video that I've been working on. I wanted to bring in a professional because I don't think it is completely right for me to solely speak on something that I really don't know about, that I've just decided to delve into recently. So I have here that very professional. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell me like your expertise in on the matters?
Yeah, sure. For all intensive purposes, I'll go by the name Ray for today. And reason being is because I still obviously have interest in this particular field, and I have some ongoing involvement with some cases. So I'll just stay as anonymous as I can for the moment. But basically, I have spent 3 to 4 years working very closely with child abuse in New South Wales. So, I've been sort of liaising and consulting with various different organisations within New South Wales who deal specifically with child abuse matters. And so I have a lot of first-hand experience with sort of what happens once a notification has been made for child abuse.
That's pretty heavy. Did you have to adjust to be able to deal with that kind of thing?
I think to be honest, it when you start, it doesn't feel real because it's so shocking, and then it's not until you have a quiet moment that it hits you differently. So I mean, I think I know some people that I have worked with who have recently had children or something like that struggle at particular different times, and it sort of fluctuates. And there are some jobs that can trigger some sort of mental issues for different people involved. But I do think you do get not used to it, but you adjust to be able to cope, and you find other things to ground you, like the justice behind it, and sort of the support. You take comfort in those things.
Well, just researching it broke my heart. I had to take breaks. I had to watch comedy movies and silly shows. It's like 3 hours of intense research, and then I'm like, okay, I need to watch Step Brothers or something really silly. It's intense, and I don't have children, but it's intense.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's I think that's why people don't know much about it. People are, obviously know it's too much for some, and it's like people deliberately choose not to really understand it because it is so devastating, and that's how people cope.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's get into the nitty-gritty of it, because you are someone who understands the stats. I'm someone who is very much all about facts, and at least I try to be as much as possible. So my first question will be, what are the overall numbers and in child sex abuse in Australia?
So when you're looking at the overall numbers for child sexual abuse, there's sort of 3 classifications. So basically it starts off as a notification, and then from a notification it turns into an investigation, and then from the investigation it becomes either a substantiated offence or unsubstantiated. So when you're looking at statistics, you almost have to assess all 3 of them. So, for example, in 2016 to 2018, there were close to 500,000 notifications of child abuse, which can come from various different agencies. You have mandatory reporting, which is something by law that teachers, doctors, counsellors, medical professionals, foster care, sort of liaison officers, things like that, if they are presented with things that qualify a mandatory report, they have to, by law, report it. That will then come through the network as a notification. And then from that, it will then turn into an investigation. You have to figure out whether a crime has been committed, as per like the Crimes Act. And then from that, you have to determine whether it's something that needs to be dealt with criminally or through other ways, through family and community services avenues. So if it's parents that might need assistance, it won't be investigated criminally, and it will go straight to the docs workers, the fax workers, counsellors. It will go down that way, and then it will go to the police or investigators within fax to determine the criminality. And then from that criminal investigation, it will then either be substantiated or not. So, for example, as I said, 2016 to 18, there are about 500,000 notifications. However, only about 200,000 of them ever were finalized, and then a further less than 50,000, like countrywide, were substantiated. So, so when you're sort of looking at it, it's tricky to have accurate statistics because sometimes the statistics are unsubstantiated, maybe not necessarily because it hasn't actually occurred, but because you're unable to prove it in a court of law. So therefore it's classified as unsubstantiated, even though for example, one of the reasons it might not be able to go to court is because the victim is too traumatized to give evidence. Therefore, it can't proceed and it's unsubstantiated.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's complicated, but
it is. But it's good to have the breakdown. I'm not sure if people are aware, like how the breakdown works. So it's good for you to explain it in that sequence.
Yeah. So, as I said, it basically, as people who are involved in child abuse matters are flooded in swamped with hundreds of thousands of notifications, and then it's a matter of trying to figure out whether they're substantiated or not, and that's when the statistics change. So they almost cut it into a third. So of whatever notifications you get for child abuse, maybe only a third of that or less will be substantiated.
I understand. Because you want to be sure. You don't just want to throw someone in who's been falsely accused or what have you. Yeah.
And
the
nature of the investigation is quite sensitive because a lot of these matters, especially if a child hasn't disclosed what has happened straight away, like contemporaneously, what can happen is physical evidence is all gone, and the only evidence that you have left to sort of look into is that which is like a witness account. And so that can get quite complicated because of the age of the child and the cognitive ability and recall of that child. So it gets quite hard to sort of get accurate statistics because, to be honest, personally, from my experience, I believe there are a lot of cases that are substantiated, but you just can't prove it, sadly, because of the barriers you're faced with.
Lord, how sad. Well, my follow-up question is, how affected do children get from child sex abuse? Is there an age range where they forget, and does it depend on the type of abuse?
So, I mean, you can go online and you can look up many sort of studies and things from people who are probably a lot smarter than me, who have done psychology degrees and all of, doctors. I'm not one of those, obviously.
I'm planning to, though, by the way. I am planning to get all different types of people who are experts in this field.
But I'll just speak from my experience with your question. So I just want to say this is just from my personal experience dealing with children. So what I've found is that the younger the child, the less likely they are going to be able to remember what has happened, obviously. And one thing that I found quite almost traumatic with my involvement with these sorts of cases was how almost 9 out of 10 times the child doesn't actually know anything bad has happened to them. So when you're trying to talk to them to find out what has actually happened, they almost speak about it like, oh, yeah, I had a glass of water and then such and such. So it's almost said with the same breath and tone, which is quite confronting because it almost demonstrates the pure level of innocence because they know no better. So that can be quite confronting. However, one thing that I was trained in is that pretty much a child under the age of 2, it's impossible to get admissible evidence in terms of what has happened to them because they aren't able to recall it. Their cognitive abilities and learning has not reached a level where they can retain and consistently recall the same event. But one thing I did learn was that certain events, if traumatic enough, can impact behavior. So while they might not necessarily be able to tell you the exact details of what has happened, you might notice behavioral things. For example, a child who previously may have been potty trained will all of a sudden have a regression and they won't want to go to the toilet anymore and they will wet themselves. So, it's that's sort of very early on. When they start to reach the age of 4, you can really start to kind of work with the child to get the information that you need. And something I noticed with my experience is they might not remember the day of the week if you ask them, was it Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, whatever it is. They might not be able to remember, but they usually have something in their mind that they've held on to that will always stay consistent. So I've spoken to children who have had something happen to them and the location and the day and the time of the day always changed, but the modus operandi and the specific details of an object that may have been involved has remained the same. So it's a consistent thing and you can work with that. And so that's at 4. So the older they get, they can retain more. But usually in the younger years, it's the behavior that you'll notice. And then usually around sort of 7 and 8 is when you can really see the emotional effect of these things, because at that age, they understand a lot better what has happened to them. And they have more of an understanding of what is right and wrong and morality. So they know that what has happened to them is bad and evil. And I think that's when more of the emotional effects happen on children as they get older. So, yeah.
That's tough. Which is the most popular, as a prevalent type of sex abuse? Like, is it penetration? Is it sodomy? Is it like touching? I know that's a very graphic question to ask, but do you have an understanding or knowledge on that?
Again, I am limited to the cases that I have worked on personally.
So on average, I suppose, from your experience?
Yeah, from my experience, over 85% of child abuse matters are from somebody that the child knows personally. There is a very small window for strangers.
Okay.
So most of the time it's a relative, a close friend, you know, somebody, that knows the child personally. So, and what I have found is the cases that I have investigated is that, to be honest, it's probably more likely that it's touching or attempted sort of penetration. Now, this is, one of those delicate sort of issues. It's, to articulate because of the sensitivity of it. But because of the age of the child, sometimes it can be very difficult for a grown man to do, the natural
Like
thing.
a child.
So sometimes an object might be used instead, or
Yeah.
a lot of the time they will try to convince the child to do something to them. So, yeah. So it varies,
Mm.
but actual penetration, proper penetration, from my experiences, in 3 to 4 years of working there, it's been a rare thing that it's been a full penetration. Most of the
Okay.
time, it's been touching, attempted penetration, an object, or oral sort of
Yeah, I
interaction.
forgot about that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Well, my final question is, how common is it? Like, is it what is as far as you're aware with your experience and whatever you've read in studies and statistics, is it every second family, every third family? Like, is it more common than we realize, or is it not that common? Which I hope.
Well, it's probably a lot bigger than people do realize.
Okay, that's
Child
unfortunate.
abuse in general, I don't deal just with sexual nature. Like I would say that my involvement with these things, matters dealing with children, is the whole spectrum of abuse.
Sure.
Now, in terms of that, you've got physical, emotional, and sexual. And
Mm.
statistically speaking, one child in Australia is either physically, emotionally, or sexually abused every 16 minutes.
It's pretty damn common.
Yeah, so that would mean on average you're looking at over 30,000 children every year that are abused.
Yeah.
Substantiated. Again, as I said, that's substantiated.
Yes, I understand.
So, and
Uh,
yeah, it's hard because in order for a matter to be classified as substantiated, it has to have been finalised, and for it to be finalised either by Family and Community Services and docs or police, it has to be finalised in their family court or criminal court. So
mm,
matters can be, as people I'm sure are aware, take a long time. They're quite protracted. So the statistics might show 32,000 that are substantiated per year. However, it could be more for that year. It just hasn't
uh,
been finalised in whatever way it needs to be. So
I completely
statistics are
understand.
quite difficult.
Yeah,
If you
I've
understand
read
how statistics work, um, they're a lot more complicated than people realize. And every time you see a statistic on a piece of paper, just know that it's probably actually not what the real statistic is.
No, I'm learning this. As I was reading through some of the research and the studies, it says there it is difficult to ascertain specific stats. So even the government bureau of statistics and all of them state the same thing. So yeah,
Yeah, it's very difficult. And again, there are lots of different factors, and you can, you know, you can break the statistics up into specific parts as well.
categories. Yeah,
It's very complex.
sounds it. Well, thank you so much, Ray. I really appreciate your expertise and your time and your candor regarding this subject. I know it's extremely depressing to talk about, but I don't really see people touching on it, and I don't know what made me decide to. But I appreciate your help with it all. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for having me, and I hope I can shed some sort of light into it. And yeah, well done.
Oh, thank you, and thank you, and thank you. Oh Lord, I'm gonna edit that out. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate everything.
No worries.
See you later. I'll just end the broadcast now.